Welcome to part 2 of Ask Bossk's Bounty. Well, Star Wars collectors, welcome to another Bossk's Bounty and welcome to episode 2 of Ask Bossk's Bounty. So this is the series where you get to ask me questions and obviously I'll do my best to answer them. So if you do have a question for next week's episode, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Leave your question there and hopefully it will be answered in next week's episode. And of course, if you're enjoying this series, don't forget to drop a like down below. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Anyway, straight on to the first question. And the first question is from Nathan Rosario. And he asks, what existing figures would you like to see re-released on the Vintage Collection cards without any changes? My picks would be Jiran, the Ugnaught and Toenails Gone from the Legacy Collection. So I'm 100% with you there, Nathan. I would most definitely pick Jiran or Giran, however you pronounce that. So he was the Skiff Guard character, a bit like Woof. So when the Rancor monster dies, you sort of see him comforting the Rancor Keeper. I would definitely like him as a character or figure on the Vintage Collection, on that vintage card. So he's definitely one. The other one would have to be probably from the same sort of thing. I'd want the Nikto Gunner. He was from the Legacy Collection, I believe. Really expensive figure these days. Goes for at least 60, maybe even £70 on eBay. And I just love that figure. So he's another one of the Nikto. And if we had him on a Vintage Collection card, he'd just go great with the skiff and the barge. So yep, they're my two picks. On to the next question, which is from DIY Star Wars Dioramas. Great video, mate. Thank you very much. My question, do you think that we will get a good amount of Mandalorian figures in the Vintage Collection, or do you think the Rise of Skywalker will flood the lines? So I'm pretty much sure that in the next wave of the Vintage Collection, so that'll be in the wave after the Shadow Trooper, that we will be getting at least 3 Mandalorian figures. So we're definitely going to be getting the Mandalorian, we're definitely going to be getting Cara Dune, and I suspect that we'll probably be either getting IG-11, which is the assassin droid, much like IG-88. We'll probably be getting one of them because that'll be an easy one for them to do. Or we'll probably get one of the sort of baddies from the series. So we're yet to see who that is. But I think it could be the guy that played Gus Fring in Breaking Bad. And of course, we do already have the awesome figure that came with the ATST Raider, which I did a review for just yesterday. So make sure you check that video out after this one if you haven't watched it already. And the next question is from Star Wars Toys Mania UK, and he says, great video, Tim, thank you very much. And his question is favourite Jedi. So I'm possibly going to be a little bit boring with this one, but this is probably my favourite Jedi. I'm not talking about the figure, I'm talking about the character in the film. I did love Qui-Gon Jinn in The Phantom Menace, but in terms of coolness, I thought he was pretty awesome. I could have gone with one of the alien type ones from Attack of the Clones, but in terms of Jedi, this guy is probably my favourite Jedi. I can't really count Obi-Wan Kenobi from, like old Ben from the original Star Wars film. He possibly was my favourite when I was young. But, was he really still a Jedi then? So I'm not counting him. But if I was going to count one of the actual Jedis from when the Jedis were at their most powerful, then I'm going to go with Qui-Gon Jinn. Palpatine 1975 says, hi Bossk, enjoy your videos and keep them coming. So thank you very much for that. I have a question. What do you wish to see in the Vintage Collection for the new vehicles or creatures? So in terms of vehicles, I'd really like to see the Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. I think that one's kind of long overdue. I think we've had the Interceptor, we've had the standard TIE a couple of times. So I'd like to see a Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. If not, if I'm looking something for a little bit more modern, then I'd probably go with maybe the U-Wing from Rogue One. I do love that ship. I have it in Lego actually, it's brilliant in Lego. So if they could make that in the Vintage Collection with loads of weathering and detail, and I'm sure the box would look absolutely awesome too. In terms of creatures, I'd possibly like a Sarlacc pit to go with this. If they could pull that off, that would be quite nice. But also I think this guy deserves to be in a Vintage Collection box. So this is just the Wampa that came with the 5POA Luke in the sort of Last Jedi boxes. But this guy is fully articulated. He has got everything. He's got, he's got elbows, shoulders, legs, knees, feet, movement. He's got a bit of everything. Nice sculpt, decent paintwork. So I think, obviously we don't particularly like repacks half the time, but if you're going to do a good repack, this guy in a Vintage Collection style box would look pretty awesome. Lily says, from any line, what is your favourite Luke Skywalker figure? So I've got 2. So this one here is possibly my new favourite Luke Skywalker from any line. So this is the vintage collection Jedi Knight Luke Skywalker that came with the 3-pack. Absolutely stunning. I love the head sculpt. Photoreal technology on his face is absolutely brilliant. You've got the soft goods cloak with it tied around his neck perfectly there, so you can have it off like that or keep it on. And he obviously comes with his lightsaber and palace blaster as well. I've just packed those away at the moment, so I can't show you those. But in terms of a figure, this guy was great. Let me just give you a close-up of that facial sculpt for you. Brilliant figure. And in terms of vintage line, so old vintage line, I think you can't really go wrong with the Bespin Luke Skywalker. So one of the best figures ever in the vintage line and one of my favourite Luke Skywalkers. Matthew Price says, have you heard anything about which figures might be released in Wave 2 of the Retro Collection? Which figures do you think they should release next? Okay, so the Retro Collection. So I've heard 2 conflicting stories about which figures are going to be in Wave 2. I've heard that they're going to be doing a continuation of all the figures from the original Star Wars lines. So obviously we've had the first 6 there in this wave. And I've heard that in the next wave that they're just going to carry that on. So we'll get C-3PO, R2-D2, etc, etc. However, I've also heard that we might be getting the Bounty Hunters and a load of Empire Strikes Back characters in Wave 2 to carry on with the 40th anniversary of Empire Strikes Back next year. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I mean, I have heard a rumour of Bossk, which would be, you know, absolutely awesome. So if we got a re-release of this guy on a vintage style card in the retro packaging, I'd snap that one up as soon as it hit the shelves. Bebo Sukul says, would you like to see any vintage mini rigs return, either as reissues or all as new sculpts? And if so, which ones? Personally, I'd go for the Cap 2, the INT4, the ISP6, Desert Sail Skiff, and the one-man sand skimmer. So you've pretty much named most of them there, but if I was going to pick one, I would probably go for the Cap 2. I always loved this thing when I was a kid. Obviously it's got Bossk on it. I always used to think that it was his ship, which obviously we know it's not. I've got the vintage one there in its package, unopened. So if they're going to create any of the mini rigs, now I know they weren't in any of the films or anything, but if they're going to create things that are outside of the film universe, if you like, then I'd go for that, most certainly. Walter Azubal says, do you play EA's Star Wars Battlefront 2? If so, would you consider making gameplay videos? Cheers, mate. So, on the odd occasion, I have in the past live streamed me playing Battlefront 2. I find it a little bit difficult trying to concentrate on the game and sort of read the chat and talk to you guys at the same time, although I do really enjoy it. But most definitely what I think I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be live streaming the Jedi Fallen Order game when that comes out. I think that'll be less concentration on the game because obviously I think it's just a one-player game. I don't have to concentrate on being killed by millions of people on a map and talk to you guys at the same time. So I'll just be leisurely playing that while reading the chat and having a good old chat about Star Wars to you guys. 1980s and Star Wars guy says, if you could pick between a fresh new Boba Fett figure or for your collection or a rocket firing Boba Fett figure, which would you pick? And do you have any tips for me posting reviews for Star Wars, Terminator, Robocop, Knight Rider, etc.? Because I'm only 12, so I'm mixed sides. So, okay, to start off with your first question, I would probably want a rocket firing Boba Fett figure because if you're talking about the original vintage one, they go for thousands and thousands of pounds, so I'd take one of those immediately. But if you're talking about the one that came out in the vintage collection, I actually don't have that figure, and that is a figure that I do want. Kind of not prepared to pay £100 for it, so if I do see one come up, you know, that I think is a reasonable price, then I will probably snap it up. But I do need that one for my collection. In terms of YouTube and Star Wars reviews, then my advice to you, if you're only 12, is to obviously make sure your parents know what you're doing and they're going to allow it. And then just kind of maybe stick to one thing. I think YouTube likes niche topics, so stick to either Star Wars or Terminator or Robocop to begin with, and then obviously you can branch out after that. But what I would say is, you know, decide what your style's going to be and stick with it. And that's my advice. Basically, I'm no expert, but that's my advice. The Worst says, my question for the next Q&A is, if Rey would paint her toenails, what colour do you think she would paint them? Oh, I think most definitely blue. She wants to hang with the boys, don't you think? Edward Schuenbeck says, the most expensive figure you have now that wasn't when you bought it, and the most expensive you have paid for. and also the most difficult to find for your collection that you want badly. So there's 3 parts to this question, and the first part is the most expensive figure you have now that wasn't when you bought it. So I'd probably have to go with Yak Face here. He's the one that came with the barge. Now, I know if you think about it, the barge was what, $500, or I think I paid £600 for it. But this figure was kind of like a freebie within it, if you like. They originally weren't going to include this figure. They sort of added it to try and get more people on board. And I would say the amount of money that this has skyrocketed in the past sort of 6 months, this would probably make it my most expensive figure that wasn't as expensive, you know, when I bought it, if that makes sense. The most expensive figure that I own that I've had to pay for is probably my carded vintage Bossk. So this one cost me, I don't know, about maybe £160, something like that. It's graded. It's only graded 70% because of the card, because we've got a bit of litho damage there. But in terms of the rest of the card, it's in lovely condition. The bubble's got a tiny weeny ding there, but as you can see, it's a pretty nice example. And yeah, it's probably the thing that I'm most proud of in my collection as well. You know, I love this thing. In terms of the figure that I want the most, I would probably have to go with a AT-AT or AT-AT driver with a offerless card. So a lot of the offers that you get on those cards often cover most of the picture of the AT-AT driver. So I'd want an offerless card, but again, they go for anywhere between £250 to £300 for a half decent condition one. But you know, they're one of my favourite card backs, and I'd love that in my collection. Squidhead YT says, what inspired you to start YouTube? So it's a bit of a weird one, really. Basically, I've always had my website, boskbounty.com, where I sort of did some bits around comics and things like that. I've always been into action figures, and I don't know, I just thought, why not sort of present what I have and see if I can build a bit of a community around my website and YouTube. So it's kind of just an extension of that, really. Big Biscuit, great name, says, what is your favourite giant vehicle that Hasbro has made besides the Millennium Falcon? So I think he's probably talking about the Legacy Collection Millennium Falcon, which I actually don't own. It's pretty mahoosive, but if I was going to pick something that's giant that Hasbro have made, then I don't think I could go too wrong with this. So that is my barge, and that is where it's positioned at the moment. It's on 2 of my cabinets. And to answer another question, yes, I will be doing a tour of my Star Wars room once I get it shipped shape. But that is currently where my barge is, and that is my favourite vehicle that Hasbro, or giant vehicle that Hasbro have released. It couldn't have been anything else, really, could it? So, alright then guys, thank you very much for watching episode 2 of Ask Boss Bounty. Don't forget, if you do have a question, leave it in the comment section below and I will try to answer it next time. I'm really enjoying this series. I think it's great. Thank you very much for the engagement and putting your questions down there. I look forward to answering them again next week. Thank you very much for watching as per usual, and we shall see you on the next one.